Welcome back to Desert Island Slabs. The season 2 finale. We got there. And as you know, each episode, I have a different guest on. And as you can see, the man that accompanies me probably needs no introduction. But I'm going to do one anyway. Jurgela is based in South Carolina in the US, and he's an investor in the life science field. Within our space, he's a beacon of knowledge, a beacon of inspiration. Some might even say a beacon of hope. But I think I may have perturbed him a little bit. As what do you get? How do you test the man of thousands of slabs? How do you get him to scrutinise them? You give him a task. And that task is to pick the 8 items in his collection. The 8 items that he would save above all others. That he would take with him if he was being banished, if he was being marooned, if he was being stranded on a theoretical desert island. But enough theatre. Let's get into it. Al, thank you so much for coming on Desert Island Slabs. This episode has been a long time in the making. You are the most requested Desert Island Slabs guest. So I'm so honoured to have you on. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm great, James. Thanks for the dramatic intro. That was very fun. And I will tell you, you're 100% right. Man, it was really, really, really difficult to come up with 8 slabs. And, you know, there's probably about 30 that were like on the short list. And I just ultimately had to just go with my heart here on this one.
And is that when, obviously, because you've seen a few of the episodes and then you kind of know you have to pick 8, is that what, was it pure heart, or did you kind of write out, or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a mix, right? But I really tended to gravitate more to the items that are connected to a story, and a story could be, any different avenue, a personal story, right? A compelling story for the actual, person on the item, which in this case I picked all cards. I also had some other kind of candidates. I know sometimes people want to pick albums or, tickets or other things like that. For me, I ended up with all cards because that's really the core of my collection. So I ended up trying to do a filter of what stories I would want with me on a desert island, right? That remind me of resilience, of something that is extraordinarily special. Now, I think as part of that, this was not an intention at all. They ended up being, probably pretty important economical, items, meaning from a value perspective, but these are definitely not the 8 most valuable items I have in my collection. They're just the ones that I connect most to the individual story.
Yeah, and obviously I've seen the choices, and they were drip feeded to me over a period of many months, actually.
Well, because it was hard. It was very, very difficult. Okay, this one definitely is in. This one, definitely not. And I think that just in the last month, which one of these cards I didn't even have 2 months ago. So, I think in the last month, I've finalized the last 2. Right.
Yeah,
so
no, it's amazing. And I think it's obviously such a weird task to have to go through and just pick 8. But we're going to come out fighting for the first one. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So let's have a chat about your first item, Al.
Yeah, so the first item that I have, and this actually is slightly different from the one that I sent you in the scan because I have a couple of copies of this, is a SGC labels this as a 1910 Red Sun cigarettes. PSA calls it a 1908. That's relevant because it could be the first card. Look at this beautiful back on this card.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Red sun. Has this amazing photographic image, and this is a green border, and this is Jack Johnson, which are you familiar with Jack Johnson? Are you into boxing at all, James?
I'm not super into boxing. I'd heard of Jack Johnson. I'm not going to lie. I now know more about Jack Johnson in the research for this episode than I did previously. But tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so I mean, he's the first African American heavyweight champion of the world. Very controversial figure because there's a lot of racism in the U.S. And in 1910, he has this fight against James Jeffries, which was a former white heavyweight champion of the world, and known as the Great White Hope. And it was like the African American versus James Jeffries. And Jack Johnson, basically kicked the shit out of him, was an amazing heavyweight champion. Ultimately, because he marries a white woman, which is against the law in Texas, where he's from, lives kind of fleeing from the U.S. because he broke the law by marrying a white woman, kind of crazy, fights all around the world, in Europe and Latin America, Cuba. And it's just an amazing heavyweight champion. And this particular card, which is fascinating. So not only is his story, and by the way, when he comes back to the U.S., he actually still goes to jail over marrying a white woman, right? And if you think about this is a little more than 100 years ago. We're not talking like 500 years ago, right? This is like how real it still was. And this particular card here, there's great baseball cards that come from this issue, is issued in Louisiana, which I would appreciate, probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but it's a very southern state in the U.S., which you may recall from your history. The southern states tried to fight for slavery in the U.S. Civil War. So when you put it on the scheme of probably relative racism, you're going to feel most of it in kind of the deep South, which Louisiana would be that category. And so this set has 3 black boxers in the set, and there are almost no cards that have survived of the black boxers, which is a super interesting. It wasn't that they were short printed per se, at least we've never found any information about that. But what it does is it just shows you the relative, just that nobody cared. If you pulled a black boxer and you were in Louisiana in 1908 or 1910, you most likely trashed it. So there's just not many of these cards. And to me, I have a pretty extensive boxing collection, but I don't post most of it on social media. To me, it's the most important boxing card of the 20th century, even more so than the 48 leaf Graciano, which was a short print for Graciano. So this card, not only is it a beautiful photographic image, it has such a story in boxing as the first African American. All of the crazy stories that go around with him, like basically fighting outside of the country for many years. And there's a grand total of 1 of these graded at PSA and a couple more at SGC. And I have a couple, the 2 SGC copies, I believe. So it's just an amazing card. The image, like literally every now and then, I know we're all weird to collect cards, but I just catch myself just looking at the clarity of the image, wondering about, this champion of a man and the crazy life that he led.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's this sort of like pugilist era of like boxing and things that I always think the word pugilist sounds very classical, but this is obviously quite a violent and brutal sport. But the card is art, actually. And you mentioned you have 2 copies of this, or maybe more. You got both copies.
I know that I at least have 2, but I may have had the 3rd. Anytime I ever saw this card, because it was important to me more so than even in the market, that I picked those cards up. And I would say that this is going to be probably shocking to most of the people watching your show, but I'll show two cards in my collection. Well, three cards in these eight are the most requested that I get from random people on the internet to see if I have another copy. This is actually one of them because, like boxing people, this is on everyone's want list.
Hmm. And have you had them for long? And I guess this kind of segs a bit into, we'll speak more about specific collecting, how you got into it, but I'm actually more like interested in how you got into how you started collecting. Was boxing at the begining of that journey, or did you come to a realization?
Yeah, so my story is like most, right? Or especially the older, guys that kind of grew up in the 70s and 80s, just going to the 7-Eleven, our convenience stores and buying packs of cards, which my first ones were Star Wars cards, I think in 1977, the blue ones.
Yeah, I do know.
You're probably, yeah, look, here's just an example, like these types of cards.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
So these were like the first cards that I got, and I loved baseball and lived pretty close to Angel Stadium. It's a very terrible baseball team, but my favorite baseball team since I was a kid. And so I kind of transitioned from, Star Wars, which I loved, into baseball early in probably late 1970s, early 80s. And went to card shows to spend my $5, right, and would spend all day there. And what was super just weird confluence of events, one day I went and I spent my $5 within the first hour, and my mom was waiting for me outside reading a book, so I didn't have any money, and I was just looking around and talking to people, and this guy engaged with me, an old African American man. His name was Lou Dials, and he just started to talk to me, and I started to talk to him, and then he started to tell me about this world that I never knew about, which was the Negro Leagues. And he talked to me about how him and other players that were there at that show, but others that had passed away were just as good as at that time other players that were well known in baseball. So he was saying how Judy Johnson was as good as Mike Schmidt, or Satchel Paige was better than Nolan Ryan. And so he was comparing all these names that I hadn't really heard of to contemporaries, and I got very interested in that history that I had never uncovered. And I'm a bit of a book nerd, and in terms of like history and trying to understand more. So he really picked my interest, and I started to research more of those players, and his stories were they just stuck with me. It's so weird how a random encounter kind of sticks with you. And that stuck with me, pretty much ever since then, even though, ultimately you go to school, you go to college, you have no money, your school debts. Like I didn't do a lot with it from a collecting standpoint, but I started the interest was firmly cemented in my collecting gene, if you will. And then I started to find out that some cards existed in Latin American countries, which was also a big interest of mine. I have a master's of international studies in Latin American cultures. And so it just lended to learning more about the issues of some of these great players that never had cards issued of them in the United States. This is one of the crazy things. The Negro Leagues had some of the best athletes ever in America, and they have 0 baseball cards issued of them while they were playing in the United States in the Negro Leagues. So all the cards issued of Negro Leaguers were actually issued in Puerto Rico or Cuba or Mexico or Venezuela or the Dominican Republic, because they went to play down there and they were celebrated there, whereas they weren't really celebrated as much in the U.S., right? And so that is something, again, emerging, kind of random merging of interests come together, and really got me started on the collecting. But because they were so rare, those items were so rare, they were quite expensive, so I could only get a little bit at a time, even though they weren't super well known. Just the fact that they were so scarce made them difficult to get to.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I find myself kind of just nodding along, even if not literally, but I'm doing it metaphorically myself in my mind as well, because it's so. In the first question I asked as well, obviously the one I ask everyone, and it's the stories and things that drive the collecting, and that's always been the case for me. Actually, it's always been the case with collecting. It's always the stories, and like you say, that's not necessarily the story of the athlete itself. Sometimes it's the story of the item, or sometimes it's the story of something it evoked within me, or sometimes it's all three in synergy together. And that's when it's a really powerful item or something. And it's an amazing. It's always so interesting finding like the origin story of collectors. I think it's not even like what they started collecting necessarily. It's how they started collecting it. And so often doing a few of these questions and things, it's actually a relatively chance encounter that entrenches it. It's so funny how it's almost like, but it was fate. It was almost like predetermined. There was an element of fate there.
Yes, I mean, incredible randomness, right? If I never met this guy, I probably wouldn't have ever had. I mean, I probably would have the same amount of interest as most collectors have. But then coupling that encounter with an interest, with other interests that played in that lane, which ultimately becomes very helpful for soccer, because I'm in Latin American countries doing deals, figuring out issues, foreign issues that Americans aren't used to, understanding the album culture. All of this feeds on itself. It's a global, baseball is global in terms of, Latin America, and then expanding that to more global, which we'll see later in soccer, is just kind of a natural progression. And boxing was quite global too, from the late 1800s, championships fought all over the world. So even to this day, boxing still continues to be quite global. So, I think that my global, nature, those chance encounters kind of made it, I love boxing, from watching Tyson in the, 1980s and Sugar Ray in the early 80s. I just loved, the sport, and, the stories gravitated to me as I started to learn more about the things. So that's, boxing. I still watch, all the Canelo fights, and, my wife and I are big, boxing fans, as well. She's Mexican. And so boxing is kind of a big part of my fandom, and it just made sense to start to collect boxing cards when the chance came, which there are a lot of them in the U.S., but there's many from international sets as well.
Yeah, and it's so interesting as well when we're going to speak about it with the at least the second, third, and fourth items, but this sort of underrepresentation component. And actually, I've spoken about it quite a lot in an episode that hasn't aired yet, but it's the last episode that would have been seen last week with Cindy Dick, Giant Legends, who collects women's sports cards. And the US, without being mean, didn't do fantastically with kind of supplying, but then there's a lot of other countries like Germany and Sweden that were actually really producing a lot of women's sports cards, actually. Yep. And it's so interesting. But from a collecting point of view, that heterogeneity makes it a bit more interesting. Because you've got different places to look, and with that, there's less homogenization of designs, there's more like variation. It's all sometimes higgledy-piggledy, and it's quite interesting. But broadly, then, we've seen why you kind of got into collecting and things, and that's really interesting and almost like broad-based. But then actually I would say that, and this is something which I don't really know much about, obviously, but something which I've seen like articles of you and PSA on and stuff like this is your Negro League collection. And you brought it up a bit about Negro League, your Negro League collecting a few minutes ago. But now the next three cards all are kind of taken from your Negro League collection. So shall we have a little chat about the second item, which introduces this chapter of El Rey Slabs.
Yeah, so my the second item is this Josh Gibson Toleteros um card. And this is very interesting. We actually have the photograph that I don't own it, but there we've uncovered the photograph of this particular swing, or after his swing, which is from the early 1940s when he was playing in Puerto Rico. This card was issued in Puerto Rico actually in 1950, which you'll notice is, if you know anything about Josh Gibson, which if you don't, I'll tell you here in a second. He actually passed away prior to this card being issued. So it's actually kind of a homage to his career in Puerto Rico, where he won the Triple Crown, meaning that he led the league in home runs, RBIs, and batting average. And he's kind of known. I don't like this moniker, but he's known as the Black Babe Ruth. He played catcher. Now that the major leagues include Negro leagues as official MLB records, he has one of the highest batting average and home runs per at bats ever. So he's clearly a great of the game, probably the best catcher to ever play. He was a little heartbroken that Jackie Robinson was chosen to integrate U.S. Baseball, professional baseball, and not him, because he was a much better, more well-known star. But the reality is that he, had a bit of a temper, was a bit of a drinker, and you needed a calm head to go through all of the endurance, the ridicule that Jackie Robinson ultimately did, and the owners stayed away from Josh Gibson. But a lot of people say he actually died from a broken heart of not being chosen to come into the major leagues and break the barrier, because from a talent perspective, clearly one of the best baseball players to ever be on a diamond. And this card, again, issued in Puerto Rico close to the time of his death, and depicting a picture that was taken there from the 1940s, is the only real option you can have on a close to contemporary baseball card of him. And it's very, very coveted card, even in low grade, PSA 1. I think, it's more than 100,000 US dollars. And
Wow.
this particular one is a PSA 7. You can notice PSA, I have my own pedigree there, the Jurgela collection, for a number of my cards. But this is one of my favorite Negro League cards, because of the player, because of the rarity, and just the beauty, condition. It just checks all these boxes for me.
And what is the card? Is it like is it a cigarette card? Is it what?
Yeah.
What is it? Is it
So it was very similar to like a soccer album, like a sticker in terms of thinness.
Right.
Slightly thinner. It's got a glossy surface to it. So there's like some almost like a lithographic printing to it. I don't know if I can. It's really kind of hard to see here.
Yeah, I know. I know what you mean.
Yeah, but these were they're in this album called Toleteros, which loosely means sluggers, that were issued over a number of years. The stock changes slightly. The first issues are monochrome in like a brown. And this is the last time that they printed an album, and this was the first one that was in color. So, and then other ones that are similar to this were actually issued in milk products as well. So different distribution. That's one of the funny things you'll see when you start to go all around the world, how different items are issued. You can have them issued in soap in Spain,
Yeah.
Milk in Puerto Rico, right? Cigarettes are, obviously incredibly common, but it is just kind of fun to learn about distribution around the world.
Yeah, a lot of the well, I say a lot of them, but whenever I don't know that much about them, but I seem to see a lot of chocolate stained Spanish cards from like
Yep.
the 1920s and
Yeah.
stuff. It's like imagine those little children taking the chocolate in Spain and things.
Yeah, I mean,
And
a
now,
a
yeah,
couple of cards that I had that didn't make the list but were super close. Other Negro League cards were like literally like this big. They're like tiny, tiny, tiny cards, and they were issued with a caramel, like an individually wrapped caramel, and they were like this small. Like you being in the UK, you may recall. Gosh, what's that one? The 1958. The really small one with the bottom.
Collinville.
Yeah, Collinville. So
Yeah,
like that, but even a tad bit smaller, and they're issued
yeah,
in Cuba in the 1920s, and like none of those, like every one of them has like a pop that you could find one or two. Like every one of those is lost to history because they were
yeah,
individually wrapped. Cuba 1920s, it just went to dust because they were so small. There was no album for those either, which I think when there's an album, you have a higher probability that people actually took them, put them in an album, and then they put it on a shelf. So, but it survived. When they're individuals with no albums, forget about it. They just died.
yeah. No, yeah. It's a very it's always interesting the origins of these things, which is yeah, where like soap and things. Like I think quite a few Dutch cards come from like biscuits or something as
Biscuits,
well.
yeah,
And
yeah. The
yeah,
Dutch
like
are my favorite. Some of my favorite Dutch cards from the early 1950s. Yeah, they come from biscuits, and there's a nice Puskas in there. Some very fun international stars. A really cool Copa. Yeah, I mean this is the problem, right? When you start to go down these rabbit holes, you can just spend hours, days, years, ultimately,
yeah.
just learning about this stuff and putting more and more things on your want list. That's kind of the collector gene that gets us all.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I think this one. Well, actually, no. I think the red and white one that's coming later is probably my favourite looking one of your
Hmm.
cards
Yeah.
you've picked. But this is probably a pretty close second. Actually, there's something about this one that I really enjoy, and it reminds me. I don't know if you've seen the like the Ruiz Romero kind of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stickers and things. They
Hmm.
remind me a little bit of that actually, like things like the
Okay.
Arthur Ashe rookies and things like that. They
Yeah.
remind me a bit of this same type of design, and I imagine they probably feel the same as well. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
They're.
it's
I mean, again, I've never measured the thickness, but I'd say slightly thicker than kind of a Ruiz Romero, but like
yeah,
negligibly so. Like,
yeah,
but yeah, like the font is similar, that they use.
yeah,
The feeling, the clean, it's like a photograph, with some just super clear, font, and you can just enjoy it. Unfortunately, on these are blank backs,
yeah.
you know.
But it's yeah. Well,
But just everything else, like
yeah.
normally I want an attractive back, but everything else is just amazing about that card.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating as well that someone so significant only has a posthumous release as well.
I know.
It's
Yeah, there's one postcard that has surfaced from the 1930s that allegedly is signed, although I'm not sure that's his autograph. And I know the collector that has that, but nothing like a card issued from a set, and it's just so disappointing because he's such a key figure. I mean, in the same way, Satchel Paige, which is the equivalent on the pitching side of baseball to what Josh Gibson is on the batting side. He doesn't have any issues in the U.S. until he, actually does make the major leagues in like his late 40s. He was that good that even in
yeah.
his late 40s, he makes the
Wow.
major leagues and gets a card as a member of the Cleveland Indians and later one as in the St. Louis Browns. But it's just, it's from a collecting standpoint, it's so much of a bummer that nothing in the U.S. was ever printed to document them. There's programs and there's tickets and there's other things like that, but from a card perspective, and the U.S. is very, very, especially in baseball, has a long history of collecting baseball cards as part of an American shared experience, right? That is cross generational. It's so disappointing that there are no Negro League cards.
Yeah. No, it's really disappointing. But it means that you can go elsewhere to find them and go on your journey as well to Puerto Rico and Venezuela, and we're going to go on a bit of a journey actually with a few of these cards. So should we have a chat about your next item 3, which is another
Negro League? Yeah, and I'm sorry I don't have this one here. I thought that I had it, but it was actually in the bank. That at least I confirmed last night that it's in the bank. So you'll have to put the scan on the screen.
It's coming up. Don't worry, it's coming up now.
So this is Oscar Charleston, and he is probably a top 5 baseball player of all time. Probably even better than Gibson. But Gibson was well known for his power. But there's two sides of the ball in baseball, right? And Oscar Charleston was an elite level defender and an amazing player from an average perspective, from a leadership perspective, and from a hitting perspective. And his cards are, he has 3 known cards, all issued in in Cuba. In 1923 and 24, 2 of them were, and one was in 24, 25, because the Cuban season is in our winter, so it bridges from one year to the next. So they go down there when it's cold in the U.S. and they play in the winter league. And so the particular Billiken here is just such a beautiful photographic card. And I have, well, here, you can probably, let's see if I can move my camera. You can see this painting up here behind.
Oh, yeah.
So that's actually an original painting by a very famous U.S. painter. And this is Oscar Charleston right there. And he played on Santa Clara in 1923-24. And this card matches exactly that uniform. The photograph is taken there. I have this photograph that I had Craig Kringler, famous artist here, make into a painting. So this card, though, and these photographic images are just so amazing. I love photographic images. And it is just crystal clear. You can see like his hands, you can, his face, the seriousness. Most historians that seriously tackle the question of who are the best players in baseball history have him as a top 5 player of all time. And he has only these 3 cards issued of him, while he was at, at Santa Clara this year. And the total PSA pop on this card is 4. So, you get top 5 baseball player, super low pops on these cards. This one happens to be the highest graded PSA copy. There's a higher one at SGC, but it just has it all for me. I mean, such a amazing card. I looked for this card for about 10 years before I found a copy. When these pops are so low, similar to soccer, the name of the game, these aren't fun games for collectors that need immediate gratification. You need to be in it for the long game. You need to wait. You need to, save your money so that when one becomes available, you can actually go get it. Because if those things don't align, the timing, the money, it's just really hard to pick these cards up.
And I think I've said it so many times that I've heard you say keep some powder or something. Whatever
dry powder. Dry powder.
Keep dry powder. That's it. And I think there are two stems to that I just want to ask you, because we like Desert Island Slabs to be an educational experience sometimes. What advice would you have then for kind of people remaining patient? How would you kind of advise people to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I try not to tell like anybody like exactly how to collect, but I will impart some of the strategies that helped me. So what I try to do is I try to create something that I call my top 10 list. And that's where I go through like this in the top 8, a very deep soul searching type exercise to say, if I could only get 10 items from now, and let's forget about the money for a second, what would they be? What are my absolute critical things? And then I also then look at, hey, realistically, could I get them, right, in terms of money? So, for instance, a Babe Ruth card recently traded, and it traded for $4 million. So while I would like to own that card, that's really not on my list of like reasonable things that I could own, that I could help to own. So you need to put in people's parameters can be quite different, right? So what can be, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem spending $1,000 for a card. For a lot of people, that's a massive amount of money. So, you need to calibrate those things to your own life. And I always tell people, please don't spend your rent money, your car money, your school money on cards. They're great, but don't get yourself into trouble, and never try to have more than 30% of your net worth in any particular asset. Couple little investment advice from life. So within those parameters, I tried to sock away, or at least have ready access, that I wouldn't have to fire sale something to get the funds that I needed to execute if something on my top 10 list came up, right? So there were many times in my collecting time, like one of the cards that we'll look at here in a second, I think maybe even the next one, where it became available. It was a very big price, and I didn't have the funds. So I needed to register where that card was going next. And thankfully, the owner was kind enough to tell me, and the new owner was kind enough to, have the interaction that when that owner needed to part with it for other reasons, he knew to come to look for me.
Yeah.
So I that's one of the things I really try to say. Cards are very illiquid, even the liquid ones, because of the transaction costs, right? You can buy a stock today, pay zero commission, buy it today, sell it tomorrow, no problem. With a card, you're going to lose at least 10% the minute you buy it, because that's going to be your fees on eBay or some other place at least. So, they're not to move in and out of quickly. Otherwise, you're just going to lose money if you're trading in kind of market prices.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's such sage advice, to be honest. And I think, I don't know. I don't think we necessarily occupy the hype spaces within the hobby and things of that whole domain, which I appreciate is the point of it. And I sound like I'm being patronising. I'm actually, promise I'm not. It's just a different. It's different. It's a different. Last 20 overs, and like I maybe do a bit of test cricket stuff, and it's Yeah, and it does go back on something I've said multiple times on Desert Island Slabs as well, is so much of collecting is actually front-loading the work, if you want to call it, in the sense that, if something comes up, like I've got this document, and it's not top 10, it's probably top, I don't know, a bit more, I guess. But if something comes up in that,
don't worry, I've got a list of like hundreds.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but this is the big difference. Where I will get out of my comfort zone. Let's say that one of them was, last traded at $100, and it's a top 10 item that's very rare, and the last time I traded was 100. I will go significantly above that comp for those 10 items.
Yeah.
But on everything else, I'm going to be really disciplined. Right?
No,
and I'm going
to
And so I think that's a little bit of a nuance with something that's really worked for me. And I've rarely regretted stretching for one of the top 10 items, because it already went through massive filtering of how important it was for me for one reason or another.
And that's the thing as well, and it almost goes back to that dreaded word comp in a way. But it's kind of like I do trust a comp. I do generally tend to, my default is to trust them, but also I do trust myself as well to an extent, and I will create my own thesis about an item, and I'm quite happy to go above a comp, like by a multiple actually, if I feel that I want something.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just the way it is, really. And especially, like you say, especially with the I think I've got a Grail list, I've called it, and some of them are very, very inane and silly Premier League moments that just obscure, that I've never seen a ticket for or something.
Yeah.
But like random stuff, like well, actually, this one, like elephant paraded around the pitch at Selhurst Park. I've got that one, but stuff like this, like, you know, just like stuff that just doesn't have any real.
Yeah, it doesn't have any real like value besides the humor and joy that it brings you. But I'll tell you what, you know, when you think about moments like that and think about things that make you smile and laugh and enjoy life, that's where, you know, economists would say, as silly as that is, that's your utility. You get value out of that for whatever reason, and don't try to minimize the importance of that, because it is important.
No, exactly. And now this is something as well. I always say Desert Island Slabs. The only time, I can't remember the match, but I remember I had a save search for ages on eBay. And it's the only time a player with the whole, like, all the letters of pancake has played on Pancake Day in the Premier League. And his name is Darren Peacock. So,
That's great stuff.
So when that ticket came up, I was like, I have to have this one because this is the Pancake Day ticket. But like, no, I may be the only person in the world that cares about that. But
Yeah,
like, you know,
I mean,
you
look,
create
there's a
your own
lot of little
utility.
things like that I know that not a lot of people care or will ever care, right? So I think there's two ways you can collect. Number one is you collect the stuff that you like for the reasons that you like it, right? And I think that's really the way that I've built my collection. And then if you are more worried about, you know, not losing money in collecting, then you have to collect the things that other people are like and are going to like, you know, may like down the road. And I think you can kind of thread both needles and dabble in both.
Yeah.
But, you know, for me, the most enjoyment is the stuff that I really like, which, by the way, on a cricket card, this is kind of a new addition for me.
Oh,
from
yeah.
the 28 Hoadley's Bradman.
I know exactly where you got that as well because he's one of my very good
Yeah.
friends.
So it was just sitting right here since you happened to mention cricket.
Yeah. And that's a shout out to PJ as well, who
PJ,
will be a
yep.
guest at
Nice.
some point in a future
Nice.
series. So, Al, we've got one more on the.
Oh yeah, shoot, we forgot
on the
the
sizzle section.
was it the
Yeah.
Jose Mendez?
Yes, yeah, we've got item 4 to discuss. So, should we have a chat about this one?
Yeah, you know, and this is a little bit of a problem for me because I don't have this, but actually I'm gonna step like 2 steps away from the screen.
Sure, no, yeah, no
Grab
problem.
something that's gonna help explain this. So this is fascinating. This is a so in 1910, remember we have the Negro Leagues that are not integrated with Major League Baseball, but in 1910, the two teams that go to the World Series, right, which is, you know, the ultimate championship in the U.S., they go and play an exhibition games in Cuba. They actually went in 1909. There's another set that documents that when they went to the island, and the local teams in Cuba basically kicked their ass, and these were the World Series champions. And most of the local teams in Cuba had the American Negro Leaguers on as well as Cuban players. And so they were quite embarrassed by that. They went back again in 1910 with the 2 World Series teams, including a lot of Hall of Famers, Ty Cobb, Eddie Plank, Eddie Collins, Sam Crawford, again, baseball names from a long time ago. And they played again against these the Habana and Almendares teams in a series, and it just happened to capture one of the first card of Jose Mendez, who is one of the best pitchers of the Negro League times, and a Hall of Famer. And most of these cards, for whatever reason, are let me see if I can pick one of these out here. Most of these cards look like this. Again, beautiful photographic cards, okay? Absolute crazy photography with a nice backdrop. And then what you can notice is on the back of these, they've all been skinned, and I'm going to use, for US collectors, they'll know what I'm talking about. They came off of a backing. There was a cardboard backing, and people peeled them off the backing. So you had this little photographic card on a backing that was pasted on at the factory. And why they are all skinned, we don't really know. This happened similarly to in a card series here in the US called Old Judges. A lot of them are just skinned. They're on a mount and people just skin them. Here is an example of one that actually has the back. So you see that it's the photograph here, and then you have the paper all around it. And then on the back, there is an announcement, and it says, hey, if you bring a set of these to a specific address, we'll give you an album, a hard album, right? So it's like a book. So part of the reason why these cards are so rare is because, you know, people probably brought some of the cards back and got the full album. And then number two, the series was only around for 2 weeks. So think of it as a 2-week promotion where these teams played, and they issued these on the cigarettes. And then the only ones that have really been found are these kind of skinned, examples of these cards. Here's another Hall of Famer, Chief Bender. So what makes this card fascinating is there's only 4 known cards that have the backs on them, and the Jose Mendez. So you're talking Hall of Fame rookie card. It's one of 4 known cards. There's about 100 known copies of the punch cards in general, and this one has its original back. It's not in great shape, not like the one that I just showed you, but the fact that it has its original back and such an amazingly clear, beautiful photograph of a Hall of Famer is just crazy that one of the 4 known was the ends up being a Hall of Famer, a Negro League Hall of Famer in this set. So, honestly, this card was probably the number 1 on my want list for years and years. And then this is the one that I was mentioning a little while ago. It became available, and I didn't have the money to be able to procure it, and I had to wait till the next owner, needed to pay for his kid's college, that it became available. So
was it a long wait?
It was. From the time that I knew the card existed to the second time that it traded where I got it, that was about 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So not terribly long. I've waited longer for other cards to come to the market. But
it shows you the time frames that you were alluding to earlier about if you are committed to it, you often there's 2 ways. You probably will get an opportunity at some point, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that ultimately almost everything that I've ever wanted has become available. And that's another learning, right? Well, probably I had to wait the longest 15 years, but it became available, right?
Yeah.
And when it became available, I've been registering my interest all along. That's another thing. Now that I look at actually most of this stuff, I'd say, well, I guess half of these 8 cards are in private transactions, right? Not necessarily just public. They're all so rare that you don't necessarily see them like on your next, PWCC Fanatics auction or, Golden Vintage auction this quarter. This stuff just doesn't show up that often. Yeah. And so this set, not only like that Mendez card on my chase list, it just has like all of these cards. Here's a Pop Lloyd, probably the best shortstop in Negro League history. Pete Hill. These are, if you were to go check these out, these are like massive, massive cards. This guy, he's a Hall of Famer, only has 3 known cards. This is one of them, his rookies from the year before. Sam Crawford, another, Hall of Famer Let's see. Have you heard of Ty Cobb?
Yes.
Yeah, so great. He played in this series. So you had this series is so interesting because it's everything that wasn't happening in Major League Baseball. It was African Americans playing white ball players in Cuba and playing at the same level and doing quite well, which kind of debunked the theory that African American players weren't of the same caliber. It was just pure racism, right? And this set, which is my I hope I can complete this set by the time I finish my collecting. I'm missing I think 8 cards now out of the 70. I try to track down if I can get one a year. I feel really good about it, and it'll be kind of my lifelong collecting achievement, I think, because it's taken me more than 20 years to get this far.
Yeah.
And a lot of time, money, effort. Some of the stories behind how I got some of these cards were just like crazy, because a lot of the stuff came from Cuba, and you probably know that the U.S. relationship with Cuba is quite difficult, and so you've got it's not like I can fly to Cuba or they could fly to the U.S. So just the logistics of trying to put this set together, the miles, people flying, the bank transfers to Germany, and suitcases of dollar bills, in hotel rooms. I mean, it's just like literally like shit you wouldn't believe. So that also just kind of creates a whole other
Yeah.
aspect to just the memory of getting some of these cards.
And of the 8 remaining, do you know where some of them are? Or are they completely in the abyss somewhere?
Yeah, I know. I think. Well, I know where about 4 of them have been,
Right.
but I don't know if they're still there. And I keep trying. I've been, again, the last 2 years I've picked up 2, which is pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. That's
If I
great.
keep that pace up, I'm done soon.
Yeah, you're done. You're done by 2030.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll have to have a
I'm
new
not gonna hold my
challenge.
breath on that one, but this is called the 1910 Punch set,
Yeah.
and it's just an amazing set. It's an amazing story. Lots of Negro League lore, lots of MLB lore, and just some of the best photography I've ever seen on any card set anywhere in the world.
And with these sort of cards, I mean, now I guess the question now maybe is a bit easier with the access to the internet and quite robust resources. And but I'm not saying you're old, but you've been doing this a while. So like, how in those earlier years, how did you find out about the existence of these cards? How did you do your research? How did you do that?
Yeah, so on the Negro League side, I ran into some guys who had started before me, and they had been to Puerto Rico and they had some of the albums. So I attached myself to them, and they helped me to come up the curve, which is part of why I pay it back, so to speak, from a collecting standpoint. Like I'm on the Vintage Soccer Discord, constantly sharing. I have lots of videos, try to educate people on my YouTube channel, just so people kind of knowing what's out there is the very first thing, right? And then you can decide whether you're interested or not. But without books to document it, without websites, it was incredibly difficult. Now, none of the grading companies graded any of this stuff, so there was just so little known, which honestly, we're still learning stuff in soccer. We're still finding new sets. We're still documenting. I mean, we're miles beyond where we were, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, the UK has always had a good, with Murray's and all this stuff, a pretty good documentation, but the rest of the world, not so much, right? Mm-hmm. So, you had to meet people sometimes in person. You had to get collector networks. You had to, I flew and visited people like in their homes from many, many, many different places to see what they had firsthand, get an idea, documentation, lots of head scratching things that you would later research. But now with the internet, it becomes so much easier. But remember, it's still not super common. I mean, most stuff is in Spanish, which, I speak Spanish, so that makes it, easier, but it's still difficult to get all of the knowledge you would need to effectively collect a lot of these items. It's still,
Yeah.
which is, hopefully when I retire, I'll finish a book on the subject to help bring people up the curve a little bit.
Yeah. That would be very, very interesting. Yeah, I guess something as well. It's a question I've asked before people, but I'm always interested. Is because you mentioned all the air miles you've clocked up and things. How is like your wife? Is she very supportive of your endeavors?
Yeah,
Like,
crazy. I mean,
yeah,
she's been super incredibly, supportive. She said no a couple times, but most times she's like, I had a, good career. We, saved for our kids' college, so we did all the priority stuff. We took nice vacations. We lived in a nice house. So it wasn't like a decision of, spending money and investing. I don't love to use that word with these types of items because that was never really the primary thing. But let's say not throwing money away. It wasn't
yeah,
seen as like consumption. It was seen more as, okay, look at, you can put money in the stock market or in, bonds, or you can put money in this. Will we be in the same neighborhood? Potentially, yes. And then she was pretty supportive of those decisions if we thought that it made sense. And we had lots of discussions on, hey, should we really spend X number of dollars on this item at this time, given where we are? And that's the other thing that I try to tell people is your personal math is what matters. It's not what
yeah,
your others say. It's not what it's your personal math. Like, do you need to buy a new car next year? Are you going to college? Is someone, your kid's going to college? You have a medical procedure. Are there other risks, right? So it all goes into the blender, and then you decide, if now is the right time or not. Now, again, past performance doesn't indicate future performance, but I'd say that, I'm a pretty successful investor in what I do on my day job, in terms of, buying and running companies successfully. But, the returns that I've gotten on most of my very well thought out, Negro League cards or even soccer cards have been, much better than I've gotten elsewhere. I'm not a seller, but that's just the reality, that it happened to be, even better than some of those other alternatives in retrospect. But at the time, we weren't counting on that. Oh, I need to buy this card, and we're going to use it to retire. No, 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 no. That's not part of that. Was not
yeah.
part of the plan.
And I guess yeah, and I guess following on from your wife and part of my, I guess my more like financially emotion support question, but have any of your children taken on because you're such like you're so passionate, have they taken on a collecting gene? Are they interested?
Yeah,
Like what?
they haven't, and it really kind of bums me out. Now they do go, like my whole family went to the national, the sports card convention this year, and the SoCo Expo, which I'm not sure if you heard about over there, where it's a
Yeah, I've heard
soccer
about it.
only expo. So they were there, and my son now has gone to what, 4 or 5 nationals, and he knows a lot, right? And he knows, and he likes it, but not like to the deep, level that
Yeah,
that I do. And I think that, look, it's hard to, like, that's not the standard, right?
yeah,
It's something that's kind of unique, that I got so deep into these things, and I find so much joy out of them, and they do, but just not to the extent that I do. And I wouldn't expect them to just like carry on the collection, if that's not an area of interest for them.
yeah. And when like they have friends around, do you ever get talking to them about collecting or anything, or do you keep it separate?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do, but none of them have had friends that are like super collectors, right?
Yeah,
And I have other stuff too. I mean, again, I have the collector's gene, so I can talk about, I've got, tickets. I've got, Lego. I've got, Star Wars figures. I've got video games. I've got
Yeah.
photos. So, like, no matter kind of what you're interested in, bats. I mean, I've got bats that are on display at the Baseball Hall of Fame here in the U.S. that they've asked to loan some things from my collection. So, I think that if they're collectors, they, I usually have something in that realm just because I'm interested and I'm just such a collector
Yeah.
at the end of it.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. I can imagine going round. I can imagine, it's like, I can imagine friends going round and then you going off on one and then them being polite. And he's like, and they're like, I have to be polite to Mr. Jurgela, but he keeps talking to you about this stuff.
Yeah, so I don't really. I mean, I try not to drag them through all that type of stuff. But every now and then, they're interested. Like Alex's friends, a bunch of them collect Pokemon cards and stuff like that. So, like when Alex did collect, Pokemon cards, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I can learn more about this, and I actually have a shockingly amazing Pokemon collection just because my son was showing interest. So I went into his neighborhood for a while, and that one worked out great too.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Right, so I think we've done the first half of this episode, one could say, and now we're actually going to do the thing that maybe you're not, because obviously we've spoken about how well known you are for the Negro League thing. So I've got a degree of bias in what I know you for and what a lot of this audience will know you for, which is soccer. And now we have 4 soccer items, and the first one we're going to discuss is actually the one that is probably my favourite one aesthetically of the items of all 8 that you are presenting. So, shall we have a chat about that one?
Yeah. So this card is Arthur Friedenreich, who was the look at just this beauty of this card. I'm trying to get the reflection off, but I'm sure you'll put something on the screen here. It's just and then look at the back. This is awesome. It's like a devil child, demon child smoking a cigarette. This comes, so Fried, supposedly scored more than 1,000 goals. Really one of the first truly elite Brazilian superstars, also of mixed race. So he has that kind of Jackie Robinson, thing going for him in Brazil. So being an Afro-Brazilian, he faced a lot of the same prejudice. And this card is just absolutely one of the most drop dead gorgeous cards. This card actually has, so I had the chance to buy this card ungraded, and this set is very rare, and I wanted to make sure that it was legit and graded and sent in. And then I because I chose to do that, I had to get it at auction. So that's both good and bad. It's bad because ultimately I had to pay more than if I would have bought it just direct. But it's also good because it allowed an elite card like this of one of the best pre-war players to come to market and kind of see what it would do. And now it holds the record as the highest paid price paid for a pre-war soccer card. So, but the aesthetic beauty of it, the player, the fact it's a pop 1. In fact, I think every single card from the series that has been graded as a pop 1. The fact that I know Brazilians that are just trying to get this card and trade tremendous amounts of value for it just is a validation that this is one of the most elite pre-war soccer cards. And just the image, the setting, like just the way they put this card together, both the front and the back, is just absolutely off the charts. So and then they use his nickname on it, which is even better, El Tigre, the Tiger. I mean, what's not to like about this card?
Yeah, it's a very aesthetically striking card. It's a very, very special card to look at. And I remember was it summer last year that this was like
I think it was.
I think it was.
Yeah, maybe like a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah,
like March of 2024, somewhere in that range. Although I tend to lose track of time.
Yeah, and so is this a card then that had some lore to it, or was it kind of discovered?
Yeah. So I mean, lore in terms of like a broad-based knowledge, no, but there is a specific website that Peter runs that talks about all these Brazilian issues and has some pictures of them, and so it's kind of like a lore that that it's out there, or cards like this are out there, and then you hypothesize, which is a lot of my collecting. I've known that a set was out there, and given the time that a set was, it gave a high probability that certain players would be in those sets. It's not a guarantee, right? I did this a lot with Alfredo Di Stefano in his Argentine issues when he played for Boca. So, there's only a couple year window. There's a bunch of sets. And then the question is, does he have a card in the set, even if it's never been seen before? And then I start to put kind of bounties out. And a lot of people do say, hey, I think there's a card like this. Please try to find it for me. And I'm going to pay a big price if you find it. And that's kind of like the story of these cards, is that the issue exists. There's a couple other in the 1921-22 range that we are pretty sure exists of Fried. But we even have, I think, a picture of one of them, but just where are they? Where are those albums? Somebody's got to find things, and finding things from the 1920s Brazil, actually anything kind of pre-1950 Brazil, is pretty tough. It's like one of these, it's not like the UK in the 1930s where there's like a ton of options. Like pre-1950 Brazil is really, really tough. And this one is just, to my eyes, probably one of the most beautiful, rare, and important players, and just super. I knew I had to get it. It was just a matter of, in the end, how much that one cost.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful card, and a very a player I've obviously heard of, but don't know too much about. Matt Hendler in his episode also presented a Friedenreich card as well.
Did he do the dollar, or no he did another Brazilian one,
he did like a green it was like a green gummy wrinkled up one.
Green. I have that one around here somewhere too, but yes, that one is the 1926 Sportsman one, I think it was. And then there's another one when Brazil played in Argentina, 1925 dollar. But the ones before that, this 1922, and there's another 1921-22, that we kind of know that album exists and have seen that one. Just make it super fun. But this one is thicker. It's like a card. Like the other one, the Sportsman's more like a wrapper. This one's like, a proper card.
No, exactly. It's an amazing looking card, and like you say, a very important footballer.
Yeah.
In Brazilian history, really, and very influential with the social things as well.
So I think that one just checks a ton of the boxes for me as far as cards go.
Yeah. And then again, so we're staying in the 1920s with the next item as well. And again, we're coming to Europe, but again, another very famous player who's also very popular and revered in the vintage space for good reason as well, I hasten to add. But so should we have a chat about your next item?
Sure. So the next one is Giuseppe Meazza. And this particular one it's known as a Stagni. You can see it's very Art Deco. There's actually this would appear to be gold leaf. I know it's really hard to see. Like, I brought this to the National and see if I can get some of the reflection. Some people wanted to see this. You can maybe see a little bit of it. It like shines. Yes. It's like a gold leaf, like a Byzantine type art. It is so gorgeous in hand. None of the scans I can ever take do justice to this card. The back is just absolutely incredibly fun as well, with just all sorts of detail on it. I find like these interesting backs that talk about how you get surprises and how you turn them in, and these things were just amazing. And so this one, while the Lorati of his used to hold the record for the most before this one passed it for pre-war soccer cards. You know, he is, I think, in the FIFA World Poll, the footballer of the century for Italy, and that's rare to have a pre-war player be the leader in a country, especially one like Italy that has such success on the international scene. But, you know, winning 2 World Cups and just being such a dominant player, this Meazza is just unbelievable. I love the series. Even any card from the Stagni series is really, really hard. But getting, you know, one of the absolute stars on the list. This one was on my top 10 soccer for 6 years before I found it. And I was just so happy to find this card. It's just so gorgeous. And I have 2 Meazza Loratis, but this one, like if I had to choose here, right? I can only bring one with me to the desert. I had to choose it. So I'm picking this one, and I'm letting the Loratis stay behind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an interesting card, because I haven't seen cards like this with these like arachnoid spindle-like projections. It's such an interesting design, because if you'd tried describing this card to me, I would have said that it doesn't sound very good. Because it's like, oh, we're just going to have a small picture in the middle of him, and then we're just going to do some spindles or something.
Some squiggles all around
it's weird. Like, but it looks amazing. It looks amazing. It's such an interesting card. How did you find out about this one? And wait, you said you waited 6 years. How did you get it?
Yeah, that was interesting. I tried to remember when the first time I heard about it, and I think that I actually heard about an Orsi, Raimundo Orsi, who was an Argentine, very famous Argentine winger, who ultimately he was Italian Argentine, so he went back to Italy and won the World Cup in 1934 as part of the team. But he went to, in the early 30s, after Argentina had lost the World Cup to Uruguay, he went to Italy to play. And or actually maybe even earlier, maybe it was 1928 that he had gone there. But he, I saw a card or heard about a card of his, and then I ultimately saw the image of the card from a collector, I think in Texas. And then I'm like, okay, well, if there's one for Orsi of this really cool series, there has to be one for Meazza, right? And so I think I talked to Paul Bowditch, in very famous kind of dealer there in the UK for many years. And he kind of confirmed that, he knew that those existed, that he didn't have one, but he at least knew they existed. And so then it just popped to, hey, I want that one if I can find it. And I actually found it from a US collector, shockingly, and it took a lot to get it out of his hands at that time, but I was so happy to just get it that ultimately I made the deal for the card. And it continues to be one of the, again, not the most valuable card in my collection, certainly, but just part of the chase, learning about it, figuring that it existed, confirming that it existed, and then trying to track it down. All of those things play into the story of the item for you as well. And just the kind of the gold leaf, which you can only really appreciate in person, has this like Art Deco feel that it's just unique. Love. Yeah,
it looks like a business card for him in some way. I just come to me. It looks like he works for Spurs and he's like a solicitor or something, and His details are on the back.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the end, you know, I wouldn't begrudge people for saying that they prefer the Lorati. Obviously, that is an amazing card. But for me, this one just takes it.
Yeah.
For me in my collection.
I think, though, all jokes aside, it's a very unique design. And that almost goes to what I was saying, is that if you described it to me, it maybe wouldn't work. But it does work with this card, actually. But it's a very unique design because you don't see this kind of thing replicated too often, at least not that I'm aware of in things. It's really, really interesting card. And like you say, the gold kind of shininess for 1928, that's probably not too frequent an effect either.
Yeah, the only other kind of similar kind of gold leaf type finish that I have in my collection is a late 1930s Yugoslavian issue. And it has like very much, even more so than this, it's like literally, I think it actually is gold leaf, which is shocking on a collectible. And it just shines like you go to Hagia Sophia, or in Turkey, in like Istanbul, and some of these murals that just like they just like shine like this Byzantine influence. It just like shines in your eyes and has an impact. And this has this to a less extent at the Yugoslavian issue, but the only two times I kind of feel that in cards, that very art infused reaction that it was going for. This card has it.
Yeah, no, it's got style to it, really, hasn't it? People have considered the design. And have you got, so you've got the Orsi as well, have you, in the other ones?
I do not, but
you don't?
It's funny. Bill has an Orsi, which is funny. So that's like the going joke with Bill and I. Who started the vintage Discord, and we continue to do kind of state of the market videos every month. So he has the Orsi, and I've been trying to get that freaking card for 16 years. And he just refuses to let it go. So it's like the ongoing joke with us. And I'll probably pass before he did, but he says that he does have a note in the safe deposit box that if for whatever reason he went first, that card would find its way to my collection.
Yeah. No, and it would be lovely to get Bill on as well, Desert Island Slabs, in a future series. I think he'd also be an amazing guest. So now, so 6 items we've done, spoken about, and now we've probably got the two most well-known people, to me at least, in your selection. And your penultimate item is a item that I've seen you present quite a bit, as it's one that always gets quite a lot of excitement in the soccer card space because of who it is and because of what it is. So should we have a chat about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately I thought that I had brought this one back with me, but it's in the bank, in the safe, but it's this one here, right here. It's the 1957 Pele Americana. And there's a couple of pre-World Cup, pre-1958 World Cup issues. This is, one of them. This particular, copy was one of those incredibly difficult transactions to actually, make happen. Number one, because, it was from a seller in Brazil who knew, the value of the item. And while we agreed on the value of the item, it's very, very difficult to, receive funds in Brazil. So we had to be very creative. The transaction took many months, many flights, and a tremendous amount of effort and people involved, like literally, legal documents, insurance, brokers, commission, like all of the work and sleepless nights or near sleepless nights, at different points. And my wife was like completely on board with this, which was a little shocking that she got like so on board with this. But in the end, it finally got here, and then get PSA to grade it. They'd never graded this set before. It was also, a challenge getting the album, a number of stickers from the albums, the sizing, all the requirements that you need for PSA to make and take the risk on something like this because they have their guarantee, right? So it was just a crazy thing, and it's something that took a long time to execute, and obviously, has to be one of the most important soccer players ever. I know we very much live in a messy world right now, but when I grew up, like Pele was the face of worldwide soccer, right? And so that's probably diminished a bit in the face of CR7 and Messi. But the reality is his legacy is baked. 3 World Cups. The importance of what he did for soccer foundations in America were huge, and just a global megastar in a way that really no others can compare. Maybe CR7 just because of his personality is just so global. Like Messi's more introverted. Maradona, amazing player, but had complicated life issues around him that didn't make him, necessarily as mainstream from a marketing perspective because of some of the positions that he took. So, Pele to me was what everything soccer was. I was fortunate enough to see him as a kid playing in the U.S., and he was just, he left all of us awestruck, even at his advanced age in his late 30s, early 40s when I saw him play.
Yeah, and for me growing up as well, when the like early to mid 1990s, but Pele, I mean Maradona obviously was spoken about, but Pele was always the one that I was kind of told was the greatest player of all time. Actually, it was always Pele from my dad, from everyone else. Pele was the one who was regarded as the greatest. Now, it seems like Maradona gets more of a mention now than he did, or maybe I'm just more engaged. So, it's who knows about biases and things like that. But Pele was the one who would be regarded as have this moniker as the greatest football player of all time.
Yeah, and then as far as cards go, stickers, cards, because he did go on albums, and a couple of these have been sold publicly. I'm still shocked that it's a Pop 2, and there's this one, the 1.5, and then there's a 1, and I think SGC has 1 copy. Given the public auctions of one of those and the results, and given how many people I know in Brazil that have been looking for these items for years, I'm just still absolutely shocked at the rarity of these items, right?
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, man, there's so much value to be found in finding these items that I'm now very convinced. Like when I bought this card, I'm like, okay, I'm going to assume the pop's going to be 10, and I have to go with that in my mentality.
Yeah.
And to see that it's still at 2 at PSA blows my mind. Just blows my mind still. And this is years after people know that this card's out there. I first saw this card in an album from a collector. I was watching a TV show for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. And they were interviewing a collector in São Paulo. It was a judge. And he was going through hundreds and hundreds of albums that he had. He had a room full of albums, and he was being interviewed for the local news station. And he pulled out this album, and he was talking about why this one was important and why this one was important. And he pulls out this album, and he says, yes, this is the first one, sticker that Pele shows up on. This is Santos before the World Cup. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get that, right? Immediately top 10 list. Like, what do I have to scratch off? And I try for years to get in touch with this guy, never ever get a response. And then finally, over time, now I'm in contact with him through many intermediaries. Matt has actually met him in person, who was on your show, who you mentioned earlier. And so it was crazy that when you see something like that, and then you're on your list and you try everything you can, and I couldn't ultimately get there on my own. I needed help. But that's every situation is different, and sometimes you can get there, and sometimes you need help, and you need a lot of luck, and you need people that are going to trust you to do the right thing, and you build your reputation that way globally.
Yeah.
And now I have enough of a kind of global reputation that if people are going to do a deal with me, they know who they're dealing with, and they probably don't want to mess with me at this point because, the word would get out that they're untrustworthy. And I think I've been shocked at my ability to deal with mostly amazing people all across the planet without issue for close to 30 years of collecting. And I think those are where most collectors reside. They want to do the right thing. Yeah. They want to, do what they say they're going to do all over the world. Every now and then there's a bad apple, but I think that's really the minority. And I think most people, we have all different definition of what mint condition is. That'll never change. But I think that's another big learning is that most people on the planet are absolutely trustworthy, and you can work with most people.
Exactly. I think it depends, almost goes back to the space that I don't really occupy, and neither do you so much, but it depends on the items that are kind of those ones that are transacting fairly frequently. I'm not saying that they're full of nefarious actors, but I just think that there's a bit less of a long-term mindset in those items, and maybe you get the kind of flippers. And we could say, I know flippers are good for economies and markets and stuff. I know that. I'm not saying they're not. But when you have people kind of with these items in hand, it's quite, you're probably a bit safer in general, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it still makes you sweat, right? I've sent, this doesn't happen to me much anymore, but when you send large sums of cash via wire transfer to foreign countries, that is a one-way street, right? So you better believe that you're going to be okay. And sometimes it takes a pretty big leap of faith to do those types of things, and it's a risk, right? I think now that I'm generally lucky enough, like I'll get a really fun shipment here this month, and my reputation now allows me in some cases for people to send expensive items beforehand before I pay. But it took a long time to kind of get that reputation in the market, kind of broadly, that transfers from country to country, to collector.
Yeah, I've sometimes, I don't sell much, but I've set people that I've trusted. I think I've done it twice. I have sent them because I know they will pay. I just know they will, because it's it's fine. I actually have no problem doing that as a thing. I just have a lot of problem doing it most of the time. That's the thing. It's just like, well, yeah, I know I can send something to some people, but I'm just not going to send it to you. Not you, the figurative you. The figurative.
Yeah, no, I know. I know what you mean. The figurative you. Yeah. I get it. But I think, and now this is one thing that's been terrible here this year. Our customs has gotten much, much more chaotic since, the new leader of this country and his crazy trade wars that he has. And it's just been an incredibly difficult time to navigate for a collector that mostly buys from overseas, in terms of new customs fees and taxes and documentation. And so it's been not been as fun this year for sure buying things from overseas as it used to be.
Yeah, but you find your ways and you keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's also an interesting point as well because it's one that you kind of just going back to the rarity thing, because sometimes I hear that, oh, you know, there's still like there's concerns about the pop and things and stuff like that, but like you don't need 100% of the population to know what a Pele Americana is, but you know you need to, but when you have enough people scouring most of the population for them, it doesn't matter if only 0.2% of the population know what it is, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah,
No,
and
I think and I learned this from like I learned this from from my Negro League collecting that I transferred to soccer. You know, Cuba is has been in a very destitute economic position for a very long period of time. And so I met a lot of people early in my collecting career that's like, hey, as soon as Cuba opens up, people are going to go down there and find everything and the pops are going to explode. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that is not going to happen because of the economic environment, everybody has scoured everyone. Like I literally know, you know, the brokers down there send people house to house with pictures of albums and say, do you have one of these in your house? Do you have one of these? Like literally scoured attics and everything because it's worth money that has a dramatic impact on people's lives. So they've been picked and picked and picked, and that, you know, now nothing's come out of Cuba in a good 15 years. Like it's done. And so I'm a little shocked that Brazil is in that situation, and I'd be disingenuous to say that the Americana Pele is going to be a pop too. But I whereas before I thought it'd be pop 10, maybe it's a pop 7, you know. It's still 2 to 7 is a long increase in pop, but it's still very low for, you know, one of the elite stickers of one of the best players ever, right? Even if there was a Messi rookie numbered to 7, you know, what would that go for? How many millions would that go for, right?
Yeah. I do love this sticker. I love his wispy little tash as well.
Yeah.
It always makes
the scary little mustache. Yeah, it's just like, oh man, he lost that quickly though. He figured out that wasn't a good idea by the time the World Cup rolled around.
No, it's that. It reminds me of the era my mum used to, when she didn't trust me with a razor, so she went up there first. She'd do it. If I was going to a house party or something, I'd be like, "Can you do it?" Because she didn't trust me with a razor. But yeah, his wispy little tash is. That's the thing that I just love it, because he looks so young, and it's just a great image.
Yeah, and then he has, you know, this one also has different point values. So this is the 2-point one, but you know, you would hand these in for prizes, and so you'd have, you know, 1 point, 2 point, 5 point, 10 point, 20, 50. I think there was even a 500 points. So you would collect these stickers, and then you would hand in the number of points to get your prizes. So obviously, if you had a very high point total, fewer of those exist than the lower point total, because those would have been redeemed because they were worth more in the redemption process, right? So it would be even more fun to get one of these that had higher point values. But at this point, getting any copy is a win.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And have you seen? Do you know of Pele's that have higher points totals?
I've heard of them, but I haven't seen another one. In fact, I've only seen 2 of these in person. Well, again, there's only 2 at PSA. Hang on, let me see. I may have a stack of other ones over here. Hang on 1 second. stack of Americana stickers because this actually came out of an album, and I could have shown you some of the different point totals, but they're in the bottom left, and instead of saying 2, it says 5 or 10. I think 10 is the highest one I have, but I've heard of a 50. Somebody said 500. Although,
really, do you know what the prices were?
There was a bunch of different prizes. Again, I don't have the album here, and I sometimes get confused with albums, but they have like, soccer balls, like dishes, oddly enough, like
nice
frying pans, irons, a whole bunch of random, a lot of domestic type things, which seems to be like, why? I guess maybe the moms, after the kids collected them, they would take them and trade them in. But I don't know. I think there's different ones that had bicycles. I can't remember what was in this album, but the amount of kind of odd prizes in Brazil is even more so than in other countries is very interesting.
Yeah. But no, if my mum took my David Beckham Merlin sticker to go get Hoover, I'd be absolutely fuming as a 6-year-old. So
I bet, which way doesn't make sense to me, but
No, yeah. Like, no, you can't. Go get another Hoover. But anyway, we have one item left. It's been such a lovely journey, running through the 7, and we've got one more. And actually, it's kind of like him. It is soccer, but it's a bit of an odd one out in many ways for the rest of what you've chosen, which has a vintage oldie type feel. And this is over 20 years old, but he's still so current that it just feels like just yesterday he broke through. But shall we have a chat about your final item to round off Elvis Slabs?
And again, it's this one wouldn't have made the list a couple of months ago because I didn't have it, and it's the CR7 Panini Mega Craques card in PSA 10. And if it was just like, if I had just bought this card, this wouldn't make the cut for me. What makes this card, interesting to me is, I was sitting around at the National with my son, and there's a tremendous amount of interest in Messi cards and Ronaldo cards, and I had bought some wax, these boxes right here, that you could rip, and I actually had a couple of each one of these. So this is the Mega Craques box, so this is the Mega Craques box with the CR7, and this is the Mega Craques box with the Messi, the 3rd series. And we were sitting around there, and we were, watching people rip, mostly modern products, right? Just like the Topps Chrome or whatever. And I said, it would be fun if we ripped some of these boxes, which is kind of a crazy idea because the boxes sell for a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was talking about it with my son, and we're like, well, if you pulled a Messi PSA 10, of course, highly improbable, that card had just sold for $1 million. And you're like, okay, I've got that box sitting at home. Well, I had 3 boxes sitting at home. Should we just rip one? And so, a while ago, PSA hosts breakers like that sell slots and stuff, but I didn't want to sell any slots. And I contacted PSA, which obviously they know of my collection. I've got they have my pedigree, and I said, hey, would you guys be up for doing kind of a live stream on your premises? And they said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And so they set it up. I went down there. Actually, Matt Hendler, who, again, 3rd time we mentioned him on your show, came and helped me.
He appears now like a genie. Yeah. He appears in the room because he's had 3 times.
Yeah. So Alex, my son, and I went out there. in the end he was too nervous to be kind of on camera and ripping these things, but we pulled two CR7s, and honestly, like right out of the pack, I felt like it was a 10. I looked at this thing and I'm like, and this was terrible. I don't know. Were you able to watch that stream or hear about it?
I heard. I haven't. I didn't watch it, sadly. I
Yeah.
probably should. I probably should have just lied, but I haven't watched it. No,
Yeah,
sorry.
no. So they were, a lot of the packs were caked, meaning
Yeah,
like they were here, and then especially if there was a like a shiny. There's like some of them are like shiny. They would like stick to one another, so you'd actually hear this
yeah, mm-hmm.
immediately. Think surface damage,
Yeah, yeah, a
PSA
little, yeah,
6. I'm like, oh, this is just going to be terrible. So they're like, you get them, they're like a brick. So, but not all of them, right? But about 30% were bricked. Like a couple packs in, pull the CR7, no bricking. It was just, it looked so good. Like I just looked at it and I'm like, man, these are 10 corners. I can't really 100% tell on the centering. Flipped it over and I'm like, oh my God, we may have just hit this. And so we pulled another CR7 as well, cracked the whole messy box, didn't pull one. So that was devastating, to literally take a box that's probably worth a small car and,
yeah,
and basically like torch it. But then I had to wait a couple days because it goes into the express lane at PSA, and come back. And then I came back for the reveal, and one of them got an 8.5. Again, amazing eye appeal, and one of them got a 10, which is the first CR7 or Messi to be graded a 10 in the last 5+ years. So, um, I think their standards of grading and their
yeah,
risk have definitely changed a little bit, gotten more difficult, and so now there's 39 PSA 10s, but to have pulled one, to do it in such a stressful environment, have my son there, it would just be one that I would take with me just because of the memory
yeah,
of all that entailed, and the emotion and the excitement about it. Again, probably not the most valuable card in my collection, but it just now after all that means a lot.
yeah. No, it's a yeah, an amazing story, and to pull a 10 as well. It's just you know,
Especially with these packs, man, because this was, man,
yeah,
these packs were just rough. They were like every pack. I'm like, no, it's bricking, and so yeah, you just never know. Which is another risk about wax, right? I mean, it's a real hard. Don't think just because you have certain probabilities you're guaranteed anything, and you can pull. I pulled other cards from the series right out of the pack. And so let me show you like some of those. Yeah, okay, there were a few other 10s, like this Real Madrid,
oh nice.
this Xavi, but look at this right out of the pack. Here's a Casillas. It was a 3
Oh wow.
right out of the pack. There was a tiny little crease that I didn't see on the back, which you can probably see in the light,
Oh yeah, yeah, I can see
right?
that. Yeah,
Right out of the pack, right?
yeah.
So you had a couple like this Quaresma was a 9, a lot of 8s.
What did
Um,
the like Mega Estrellas come out like opening them? You know, the green foil ones. Were they a bit scratched or anything,
yeah,
or were
so
they?
most of those weren't even gradable. Like
Yeah,
let me see if I did grade one. So here's a bunch, 9, 8. So like these had the same type of surface, with the
yeah,
shiny, surface. This was an 8. So I think that in the end, when I did the math, here's a Ronaldinho was an 8. Um,
yeah.
I think that's what you could. The Zidane was an 8. The Beckham was an 8, right?
There we
And then
go.
there was a lot of cards that I
Good
went
boy.
through. that I just couldn't grade because I immediately saw they'd be sixes. Here's a Ronaldinho 7. So
Yeah.
right out of the pack, what you're really looking for, I mean, what you're really getting in most cases, these are all 7s, right? There's an Eto 7. 7 or 8 is kind of what you can expect
Yeah.
right out of the pack, right? So it's not like when you see a 9 in those types of things, that is very high grade,
Yeah.
right? Because right out of the pack, and again, some of them are 3s, and a lot of stuff were just like these. I never. Here's a bunch of the stuff right here, cards that are thought I could grade them, but in the end, these were just kind of ungradable. Some Star Wars stuff, but like these checklists, they were just unbelievably crookedly cut, like completely miscut. I don't think you can fully see that.
Yeah, no, I can see a bit of a diagonal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of this stuff was just terrible. Here's Michael Owen. But anyway, there's they were this Figo has like scratches on the surface, like out of the pack scratches, right? I forget what's wrong with this Roberto Carlos, but yeah, so there's there was a I think the math was like 7.7 was the average of the graded ones, plus all this stuff that there was no way it was going to grade.
Yeah. Of the hundreds of cards you would have opened though that you met, you obviously didn't meet the 7-1 bis. The one card that you kind of would have picked to be perfect was the one that was perfect.
I got 3 10s in all the cards that I graded, and one of them was the one, right? So in the end, the crazy idea that we had worked out for us, like economically, right? But just barely. I mean, it was like, it was scary. And like I did the PSA posted, if you haven't seen it, James, you should see it because
I'll watch it.
Like on my Instagram, you'll see PSA did this nice little video of the revealing, and I gotta tell you, like, people are like, "Oh my god, you must have been so excited," and I said, it was not excitement, it was relief.
Yeah.
It was just like, thank God.
It's I think it's really nice that you did it. I don't know. I could never do that. It's just I'm so risk averse that I just can't. Obviously it's a bit of fun, and obviously that utility of the fun aspect as well I have to respect. But but specifically actually in that regard, opening wax like that, it's just really not for me. It's just really not for me.
So I mean, I would have 100% been with you, right? Like all of my life until this year. And the only reason, like if I only had one of those boxes, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
It was a confluence of event of, me trying to think about what my collection, where it goes when I'm not here. Me trying to calibrate the items that I have in my collection together with that personal utility and uniqueness to be able to do it. Like not many people, forget about like a lot of people said, "Oh my god, that takes incredible balls." Forget about the balls of like doing it, but like the ability to make the choice to even do it, right? To have one box of each and actually do it, and then still have other boxes if I need it. And I still have great messy rookies in my collection. I have CR7 rookies in my collection. So it's the value for me of giving it a shot was totally worth it. But I'll tell you, I was devastated when I didn't get a Messi. Even if the Messi would have been a 7.
No, I know what you mean.
I was still absolutely devastated. So it's not for the faint of heart either. And I did I regret opening the Mega Craques, looking for the 71 bis? You bet I did. right after that, right? But I knew that was part of the game and
Yeah.
part of the risk. And if you do the calcs, you have a 58% chance of pulling a 71 bis out of that box if you don't assume that the bis cards are double prints, which I think most people do. So, but you're somewhere between, high 50s and, 90% of the
Yeah.
time.
Got quite unlucky then.
Yeah, I did get pretty unlucky
But
on
you
that
got
part.
very lucky. As a
Yeah, and then on
collective,
this
you
side,
got
I got
very
very
lucky.
lucky, right? So
Yeah.
it's just
So
the way,
together,
yeah. In aggregate, it worked out, but
yeah.
it was pain at the end.
Yeah, but you got the CR7 PSA 10 now, so
Yeah.
can't complain.
And this one's going with me to the island, man. It's going to me.
Yeah, no, oh yeah, exactly. We've been through the 8, and we're done. That was really enjoyable.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on again. It's always fun to see the parameters by which people do the very, very difficult task of deciding. And I wonder if 5 years down the road, how much of this would change.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's okay. I think it's okay for people and collectors to evolve over time and not remain stagnant and move things in and move things out, not just of their top 8, but of their overall collecting strategy, depending on how your interests evolve.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it's like you say as well. It's such a cliche. It sounds so twee, but it's a complete journey, because also it's like you're not, even if you switch lanes or change lanes, you don't. It's not a whole new start. Actually, it's a lot easier to apply, like you said, of the Negro League concepts you apply to soccer, and I've done that in different domains as well with tickets and things. It's quite easy actually, because you kind of know what you're looking for, and then you can target. Even if I go for tickets and then occasionally doing some music stuff a few years ago and started, you kind of think, oh well, that's how I would approach that. And even applying to things like not really hobby things, but things just within my life, I'm like, oh, how would I collect this if that was, and it's not a market or anything, but it's just something, oh yeah, I collect that, collect this. And it's always interesting, because you're always learning new skills and stuff like that.
Yeah, and applying the learning that you have from other areas. So it's been a super fulfilling part of my life, collecting, and I will, continue to do that and be part of the hobby, and hopefully others get enjoyment out of not just my story, but all the people you bring on, and hopefully they forge their own path on the journey of collecting. And if it's not fun, then why do it, right? It should be something that's enjoyable, or hopefully you find a sense of community, and are learning something, and you're adding something to yourself and others. And if you're doing all of those things together, it's a super big win. And if there's the absence of a number of those things, then you should probably find something else to do. But for me, I found my home kind of in collecting things, and particularly attaching some relevance to the stories, and appreciate you kind of bringing more of those stories to the forefront through your series, and of course wish you the best in your own collecting as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Al. Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. We finally did this episode as well, after we kind of planned it, and I planned it as the season finale, and then obviously life got a bit busy for myself and things, so there was a bit of a delay, but it was just suspense for what has been an amazing chat. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And
thanks for having me, James, and the best of luck to you and yours, and your own personal collecting journey as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you very much to Al, and thank you to all the viewers for watching this episode and this series of Desert Island Slabs, which has now sadly come to an end. Al was an amazing guest. You've been an amazing audience, and I will be back with Desert Island Slabs probably at the end of 2026. early 2027. But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Al.